Hello everybody, hope you're doing really well. This is my ghost story and I hope you really enjoy it. It's a 100% true paranormal story and it involves a lot of different aspects. So it might be quite a long story for some of you, so please just stick with me on this because there's a lot of different things that happen and it's more than just one singular thing really that sort of takes place. So first thing I want to sort of start off by saying is that I just want to say a massive thank you to Harley or Emma for agreeing that I can sort of involve her in this. We're actually really good friends. She also happens to be an ex of mine as well, and she was involved in this, so she was a witness to this, and it's quite a crazy story. So sit back, have a cup of tea or a coffee, and let me just take your mind off of things for a certain period of time, and hopefully you can just relax. And then, as I said before, this isn't a consistent thing at the moment where I'm doing 3 videos a week. As you know, the format as it stands of this video is that you get your main historical video every Monday. Then you'll get a midweek video. At the moment, it might be paranormal or it might be like a normal sort of mini historical type of sort of video. And then the idea is that the bigger the channel gets, the more time I can hopefully invest in that. And then what would happen is then you would have your normal Monday big historical video. Midweek you'd have your sort of mini historical video, and then at the weekend you would get a paranormal video. And as I always say to everybody out there about the paranormal sort of side of the videos, it's not a case of whether you believe in that type of thing or not. It's just the story that it pertains to and the local historical sort of side that ties up with that. So hopefully that all makes sense to everyone. So my story involves a very well-known sort of tourist attraction in the southeast, which is known as Chislehurst Caves. And I was so let me take you back. So me and Emma started dating about 27 years old. I'd never ever been to Chislehurst Caves before until I was a kid, I think, or very young when I'd gone there. And I always tend to sort of, if you know me, always tend to sort of avoid historical sort of big places like that, because it's just the sort of sense of adventure just sort of I get it doesn't feel like an adventure to me. You know, I'm not in the middle of a field, I'm not sort of getting dirty, I'm not sort of looking to find where this place is because it's just there. So on this instance, we decided to sort of travel down there, and me and Harley, she's also called Emma, by the way, but I call her Harley. We share a love of the paranormal and the unexplained, and we also share an interest in historical exploring as well. And at the time, she lived in Essex, and we used to go round, and she might as well have been an urban explorer for all intents and purposes. And we used to go all around Essex, and we'd sort of like do these types of things. And whereas her leaning was more towards the paranormal side of these historical locations, for me, I was more of the historical side. But I also, for vice versa, for both of us, we also appreciated the other side of those aspects as well. And on this occasion, we decided to go down to Chislehurst Caves, and which is near Orpington, Bromley, which sort of straddles between Kent and London. And it's famous because it's one of the biggest air raid shelters in the southeast, and it was used for a lot of other things as well, such as a mushroom farm, and it was used for mining chalk, which was its main purpose originally, and then it was turned into a music venue in the 60s. So it's got a huge amount of history. Doctor Who, parts of Doctor Who have been filmed in there, and a couple of other movies as well. So it's got a well-known historical sort of lineage, and it's very, very interesting going down there. But this was mine and hers first experience of going down there within memory. So the first thing was that we decided not to know anything about the paranormal or the historical side of things. So we decided that we just wanted to go down there with a fresh perspective. Excuse me, my voice is going. A fresh perspective, so that we experienced it without knowing anything prior to it, which I think is actually a really good thing sometimes, especially when you go to like touristy locations. I think it's better to sort of go there and learn for yourself whilst you're down there than actually sort of know a lot about the history of the place before you get there. On a touristy side, by the way, I'm just saying this on tourist attractions. I don't mean for sort of like urban exploring locations. It's essential in those matters. But when it comes to touristy locations, I personally think that it's probably better the less you know than you find out for yourself whilst you're down there. And we sort of did that. And then we arrive, and the first thing that we encounter is, or I encounter, should I say, is there is one thing that I would easily sort of, there's two things that sort of I feel uncomfortable about with everything. And one of them is cave spiders, as I've probably moaned on about. They're just ugly spiders, and they have egg sacs, and they're just not nice looking creatures. And then so I just don't like them. And the irony is that most of the places that I go to, I will encounter cave spiders, and I just don't like them. And then the other thing that I don't like, as I've sort of mentioned before in a previous video, is that I'm not a fan, from only because I'd had an incident once with wooden floorboards, like old wooden floorboards. I don't need to explain that story. I think if you've watched, it might be Hodgson's Mill in Robertsbridge, where I'd sort of explain that, and I've probably explained my incident that had happened to me once at an asylum where I got stuck when I was a teenager. It was one of my first big explores that I'd done. Anyway, so they're the two things really. I don't mind heights. I don't mind sort of woods. I don't mind the dark. I don't mind any of that. In fact, I'm kind of one of them people, I probably feel more comfortable in the dark than I do actually out in the daytime, to be honest. I kind of just like, I just prefer it. I think it's like, you know, it's more, there's something more tranquil about it in a certain way. Less noise. And so I don't mind that. And I don't mind going into places where I've got, you know, like I'm literally cramped up, like literally you've got shoulders width of like cave or anything like that. I don't mind any of that really. So, but yet for some strange reason, the moment we get into Chislehurst Caves, I go to the toilet, and there is something about, I don't care what anybody says, like there is something about, you're going to laugh at this, there's something about the Chislehurst Caves men's toilets that I just don't like. It's very sort of, if people describe your side effects of what infrasound is, which is this low sort of sound spectrum, it's very similar to that, and it sort of applies to me in the toilets. It feels very sort of, all of a sudden you go in there and it's very eerie atmosphere. They're not big toilets, but you get a very eerie atmosphere. It's sort of just very creepy. I don't like it. It's just sort of just something about it that just doesn't resonate with me. I'm sure, like, you know, that there's probably some rational explanation as to why I feel very uncomfortable in there. I feel like, you know, that it's basically the sort of side effects of what you'd experience with infrasound. So I'd be interested to know if there have been any infrasound experiments down there, because it really is just sounds very like the side effects of infrasound that I get when I've gone down there on multiple occasions. So I tend not to sort of go to the toilet when I'm down there if I can avoid it. And it's the only part of Chislehurst Caves, even after I've told you this story, which I still am sort of reluctant about, which is kind of crazy, because once you'll hear my story, you'll be like, how the hell? So you rock up and we are just chilling out, gone to the toilet, and I've already told Harley, I said, oh man, these men's toilets are like something else. They just feel really weird. You know, just don't like this my spiritual radar sort of kicking off really badly. You know, and when that does that, it's not a good sign. So I'm sort of down there. And we've gone and we started the tour, and with the tour you don't get to pick who you go with. You kind of just all go together, so you're kind of like it's basically like it's not a set booking. You choose what time you want to go, so you pay your ticket when you're in there, and then it'll be like the tours every hour. And then what I mean by all of that is that sometimes you can go with groups of like 5 people, sometimes you can go with groups of 15 to 20 people. So you really don't, it's purely down to how many people are down there at the time. And obviously the more people down there, the less sort of intimate it sort of feels. So you know, like I said, it's always one of them sort of places where really you want to try and go when there's not many people going down there. So we had about a group of about 15 people in our group. And we've just started, and the tour guide sort of explains everything to you, the do's and don'ts and blah, blah, blah. And you're kind of like, okay, cool, And we've gone down there, and then you see like the post office is one of the first things you sort of encounter in the actual cave part itself. And you realise, oh, okay, like this is going to be quite a huge cave system, And then you get given a lantern, and the lanterns are about like yay high. Excuse the cup. They're about yay high, and you get one, and you can either have one between 2 of you, or how many there are really. And then you walk through, and as you walk through, you can depends where you go, but you see this big map of the cave system, and it kind of and it really brings home like how big the actual whole cave system itself is. So you're kind of like, oh wow, like this is huge. You know what I mean? Even when they say to you like it's a big system, and you're kind of like there and you're looking at this map and you're like, wow, this is like big. And then you look to your left, you aim towards your left, and then what you first encounter is you see this what would have formerly been like it was a church or chapel area. And they'll talk about Cavina, I think her name was, which was the girl who's the one child that was actually born within the caves. I don't want to say too much because I don't want you to, if you haven't been there, I don't want to say too much because if you do go there, which I thoroughly recommend you do, I don't want to say too much about the history of it. They talk about her, and she was like she was the only person to have been born in the cave system and blah, blah, blah. And you see like these mannequins, and you see like this altar bit and whatever, and like you see these, and you get the idea, and then that pretty much sets you up for what you're going to probably experience. And then you turn right, and then pretty much your tour pretty much starts then. And so you walk through, and on your left, you see like this ammunition storage, and you see these, or a reenactment of them, and you see these 2 mannequins with these guys and like these soldiers, and you see like the ammunition that's being stored in there, because again, it, like I said, the cave system, without going too much into detail, it was multi-purpose, loads of different phases of history or functionality, and some of it was used as a storage, and you see like the idea of what that was. So in our group we had a couple, and they were probably a little bit, they were older than me and Harley, and I think we were probably, there was probably, out of the 15, there was probably a few of us. I think we might have been the youngest actually in that group at the time. Youngest as in young adults. And this couple had got 2 kids. It was a boy and a girl. I remember it very well. And they must have been no older than 8. The daughter was younger than the son, I think. That was how I always remember it. And they're hyper. So they're sort of zigzagging in and out of the group. And this is what I was sort of saying about, you can't pick who you go in your group with, because you want to sort of be ingratiated. And if there's like things going on around you, kind of easily be distracted. So bless them, by the way. These 2 kids, because I would have been the same when I was younger. These 2 kids are sort of zigzagging in and out, and they're kind of like, they're sort of chasing each other and blah, blah, blah. It's a lot of fun. And I've got this, let me just put my coffee down. There's this, I'm holding my lantern, and I'm thinking, oh man, I'm going to clobber one of these in a minute, because where I was holding the lantern, it would have been pretty much been at face height for one of them, and I didn't really want them to sort of zigzag in and out and go kadoomf like this on my lantern. So as I'm sort of like looking down, I'm sort of noticing that there's what can only be described as a ghost in front of me. This is, as I said to you before, this is everything that I'm going to tell you is 100% true. I'm not going to exaggerate the truth. There's no need for me to do that. I'm just literally telling you how I saw it. And as I'm looking down, because I'm thinking, oh man, I'm going to hit one of these kids in a minute. There's this girl, and she's looking up at the tour guide in the group, and me and Harley were at the back of the group, and Harley's intently sort of like listening to the tour guide, and I see this girl, and I only see the back of her. I sort of see the back / sort of side of her, like that ish, and she's looking up at the group. And what's really interesting is that she's sort of coming in and out of like what I would describe as like a sort of visual spectrum. So what I mean by that is it's almost like if you were trying to tune in something like a TV back in the day, how old am I? You'd sort of slowly try to get the picture, and that was kind of what she was sort of doing in my eyes. And again, it might have been something to do with the fact we were all holding lanterns, and if you know what a lantern does, sometimes it can flicker and its spectrum's just, and obviously the light, whatever. And she's looking up at the tour guide, and I remember it like it was yesterday. She's got what seemed to me, again, I don't want to sort of exaggerate the truth or anything else, what seemed to me like she had strawberry blonde hair. And what I remember really well about it was she had like a centre parting. So it was kind of like this. And she'd got a blazer on, and I remember that really well because you know how like the blazer's got like these sort of, are they lapels I think they're called, and you could sort of see this cut, and in again the light it looked like it was like a dark blue blazer, like not black but a very dark blue. And what I also noticed, which really sort of was like, wow, okay, she'd got a bit of string on her shoulder, and string, it was, and obviously string is on a dark blue or black would show up quite well, and it's sort of going from her, I want to say it was her left shoulder as I'm looking at her from the back, so it would have been down there and it would have come across even on her back, okay. And the first thing I'm sort of thinking to myself is, oh, that's interesting, because it's really weird. I'm sort of dissecting it. I'm doing my investigation sort of like brain, and I'm thinking that's interesting because in World War II, kids would have gas mask boxes in these little wooden boxes, and they'd have their gas mask in, and they'd be attached by a bit of string. So you'd sort of have that, and it'd sort of go like that. And I was like, wow, okay, like this is kind of weird. And I'm just seeing this girl look up at this tour guide, and I can see this bit of string, and I can see her, she's got centre parting hair, and her hair's probably about down to there. But what I don't ever remember, even to this day, I don't remember seeing the bottom half of her. I sort of see her back, and I can see this like trim of her blazer just sort of like coming down there. And I can see her looking up at the tour guide, and I'm thinking, okay, all right, this is interesting. Like, I think I'm actually seeing a ghost. I'm like, what? And as soon as I'd sort of seen her sort of like look up, and she was sort of fading in and out of colour. She's looking up at the tour guide. Then she sort of disappeared. And as she sort of disappeared, she either disappeared in front of me, or I looked up and she'd gone. And that was it. And I was like, wow, okay, I've genuinely just seen a ghost here. So we get round, and I'm still sort of trying to process what I've seen. I wasn't scared. I was very, like I said, it was this curiosity of like, why am I seeing that? Why did I see that? Why was it so sort of in and out of clarity for me? Why am I, again, why? I'm trying to process all this history that they're sort of like throwing at us, the tour guides, and I'm sort of going, wow, this is great. And again, you're in this amazing area, in this location. So there's so much stuff you're trying to process. And we get about 3/4 of the way through, and we've done all the sort of stuff, and done the sort of I don't want to give too much away, but they do this sort of like bit that that goes dark. I'm not going to say too much, noise, blah blah. don't want to say too much. Done all that, and that was, you know, sort of interesting, you know. Get towards the end, and from what I remember the tour guide saying, because I don't want to misquote people here, I don't want to sort of misquote some history. We get to what I remember the tour guide saying, which was where they'd removed the chapel. So the chapel that we saw at the beginning, or the church, for some, I can't remember whatever reason it was, but they'd relocated it to this certain part of the cave. They'd either relocated it or it's just another sort of chapel or church bit. And you can sort of see this sort of, it's like a door frame, sort of like black, big sort of like entrance. And you can sort of see with the eye of faith, like benches and everything else inside it, but it's very dark and you're sort of like quite a distance away from it. All of a sudden, this is still on the same tour, by the way. Just want to clarify this. This is very strange what happened to me that day. All of a sudden, the tour guide's just sort of explaining stuff. And me and Harley, I remember we were at the far right-hand side of the group. So again, we're at the back. Not through choice, just because it was quite a busy group. All of a sudden, we hear the little girl from our group scream. I mean, it was a distressing scream. It wasn't like your kind of like playful kind of scream noise. It was a distressing scream. And I've never, even to this day, seen a child do this. She literally like jumped, crawled up her mum as quick as a flash like that. And she wrapped herself around her mum while screaming and getting really upset. And she was hugging her mum so tight. And even me and Harley were sort of looking, going, well, that's a bit weird. And as that's happening, I'm sort of looking at this entrance. And for some strange reason, I'm just intently drawn to this entrance of this like church chapel thing. Again, I don't want to get that too wrong. As I'm looking at it, I can see what I can only describe as like a... if I had my hands like that and they were a cloud, okay, so it's like a sort of misty cloud and you just sort of see the edges of it do that sort of thing, and it's gone to the left, and I'm thinking, okay, this is really interesting. It's like this big dark cloud that's sort of doing this on the edges of it, so it's like this fluffy thing, but it's got these not like tentacles or anything, but it's got like wispy bits that are sort of like very individual. And they're sort of doing this, and it sort of goes to the left. And I'm thinking, guys, is anybody else seeing this? And I'm thinking, oh, it must be, again, like, you know, my rational brain sort of kicking in. And I'm thinking, it must be something to do with everybody's holding lanterns. And it must be like the light is sort of somehow reflecting off of that. And it's sort of causing shapes and images. But I just remember the sort of outside of it doing that. And so I'm there and I'm thinking, okay, what the hell? It's gone to the left and I'm thinking, interesting. And then it's gone to the right. And then what I didn't realise, I was so transfixed on this sort of weird looking cloud, spectral image, that the group had started to move on. And I remember Harley going with them, and I'm still looking at this image and I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe it's like I said, everybody's lanterns are now moving away. So maybe it's like I said, the lights bounced off something and it might be dust. I don't know. So I'm sort of looking at it. All of a sudden, it goes to the middle again. And then it starts sort of moving forward towards me. And it got to about 6 foot away, I'd say. So it went from the left to the right, like floating, and then it went back in the middle, and then it started going towards me. And I just saw this, like all this go. I'm like, okay, interesting. So I just walked away. I thought, no, okay, there's no need to panic, no need to sort of, you know, like, no need to sort of be that way. So I just walked, and I wasn't that far away from the group, by the way. I just want to sort of clarify that you're not allowed to sort of like leave your group. So I wasn't that far away from them, but I was far away enough that it was literally, there was just me. So I've gone, and that's sort of like the end of the tour. And so me and Harley have sort of like sat outside and we're kind of like, oh, that was really interesting, wasn't it? And I was like, yeah, you know, like it was very interesting sort of what we'd seen. And then as we're sort of chatting, the couple with the children have come out, and the girl has literally peed herself all down her trousers, and you just saw like this huge like puddle all down her trousers. And I think it was Harley who'd actually said, oh, look at that sort of thing, look at that, there's that kid, as they're sort of trying to put her back in the car, bless her. And she was still distressed. She was constantly distressed since that incident. And ever since then, I'd kind of thought to myself, I wonder if it was because she'd seen what I'd seen, or, you know, because in theory, children would be receptive to this type of thing, wouldn't they? You know, you hear stories of that anyway. I was thinking, I wonder if that's what she'd seen. Because it was just so weird. They were so playful throughout the whole thing. And all of a sudden, literally, just at that moment, which I'd seen, she just literally freaked out. And it was so distressing, honestly. I don't really like hearing, nobody likes hearing those types of sounds. So that had happened, and a day had gone by, and then I met up with a few of the guys at a pub, and they were kind of like, oh, you know, how did it go at Chislehurst Caves sort of thing? I was like, oh, you know, like, yeah, like, I thought I'd seen a ghost, and I told them exactly what I'd sort of said to you, and they were like, oh, yeah, you know, okay. And I was like, yeah, I know, and even I was agreeing with them, thinking, no, I couldn't have seen what I'd seen down there. There's no possible way. Because ironically, knowing what ghosts there should be down at Chislehurst Caves, the ones that I'd seen, or the things that I'd seen, aren't normally commonly reported down there, or that I was aware of anyway. So they were like, well, look, let's go with you. Let's go there again. And I'd called up Harley, and the thing was, I'd not told her what I'd seen down there. And I know you're going to sort of scream at me down the YouTube and say, why didn't you tell her what you'd seen down there? And to be fair, at the time, I was really embarrassed and I was ashamed, because I love, as I said before, I love the paranormal, I love the unexplained, and I love true stories. I mean, I was one of these kids, you'd have to be of a certain generation to remember this, but I used to religiously watch Strange But True, which was like this TV program in England. I think you can probably still see some stuff on YouTube of that. And it was these true stories, and I used to read ghost stories. I mean, I have masses of ghost books, like true ghost books and true stories. And I was always one of these people, like I said, I always had an investigative mind about it. I was never necessarily a believer. I was just very curious at how we were seeing these things, what they really meant, you know, all that type of scenario. And I'd confessed to her, and I'd said, look, I'd seen this stuff down there, but I didn't really want to tell you because I didn't want you freaking out. And she was like, oh, okay, right, you know, because I think at the time, she'll put this down in the comments below, by the way. I think at the time, like she was very uncomfortable about going down there anyway. I mean, like in terms of like, you know, she was quite spiritually tuned in down there as well. And so we'd sort of done that, and she was like, yeah, we'll all go together. So this is really where the story, I think, for me, becomes very interesting. So I'd spoken to my mum that night. I'd come back from the pub early, and I remember saying to my mum, like, I'd even said to my mum, I mean, this is a day that's gone by, because I just needed to process it. You know, when you see these two things, and you're kind of like, I just can't explain them. I can't rationally explain what I've just seen, you know. And my mum had said to me, like, she goes, maybe it was because she wanted to show herself to you. This child, female ghost that I'd seen. She goes, maybe she wanted to show herself to you. You know, maybe she was maybe she was being involved in the tourist, you know, the group. Maybe she wanted to sort of like, you know, listen in, you know, like trying to, and it made me really calm and settled the moment my mum had sort of said that. Because I was like, yeah, maybe, you know, it made all sense, you know, like, ghosts will only show themselves if they feel that they can show themselves to you. I suppose is a sort of, if you believe in that sort of side of things, it makes sense in that way, you know. You know, that they'll show themselves for a reason to you, whatever reason that is. And I was like, okay, really. And the black cloud thing, I'm going to come back to, because that's something else. So there's me, Harley, and then two of my friends, Ian and Sam, who we've grown apart. I still care about them deeply, but they've just, you move on with age. And they'd come down because they were really curious about it, and they'd never been to Chislehurst Caves either. So I was like, okay, cool, we'll go down there. So we get down there, and we're in a smaller group this time. So there's us 4, and then there's another group of 4. So there's 8 of us, and I remember that very, very well. So there's 8 of us that are down there in this group, and we go through the tour, and everything's fine. And then about 3/4 of the way through again, something happens, and I don't want to say what happened on that instance, because Ian and Sam aren't here in this video, or they're not there to sort of put their own take on it, because I think something happened that I can't explain again, but I don't want to say that part of the story because Ian and Sam aren't here to sort of like tell their part of that story, and it wasn't a huge thing anyway, but it was something that I think we all sort of looked at and were like, oh, that was interesting, what happened then. So I don't want to say their part of the story, but we get towards the end and I don't feel anything. Like, I didn't even feel anything when I first went down the last time, which was really strange. I didn't, like I said, apart from the toilets, everything else was totally fine with. So I'm there and I'm like, okay, great, cool. I didn't see anything. And when we're down there, I was having to be a sort of like mini tour guide for like Harley, Sam and Ian. And I'm basically sort of saying to them, look, this is where I saw this. This is where I encountered this. And they're kind of like, okay, cool, blah, blah. And in between that, like I said, something else had happened between them. So like, it's like, okay, right, we get it, like, and it was cool. I was like, cool, right, good. Glad we all agree. So the tour ends, and I'm thinking, oh, thank God, like, nothing happened. Like, not like, thank God in terms of like, nothing happened really to me. Like, I was okay, really, and it's kind of, it sounds very stupid about sort of saying the other thing that happened, but I really can't. It's not fair that they're not there to sort of like justify it. So we've gone along. Tour ends, and the tour guide does the customary thing right at the end, which is like, okay, has anybody got any questions? Because there was only 8 of us, it was such a small group for us. It was just like, okay, and one of the members from the other group turned around and said, "Oh, has anybody died down here?" And I could be wrong on this, but this is what I remember. So again, please correct me if this is wrong, because since that day, since I've gone down to Chislehurst Caves on multiple occasions since, I've really refused to sort of acknowledge this, really. He turned around, the tour guide, and said, yes, a girl or a child had died down here. But she didn't die down in the caves themselves. It was an incident that had happened above. So immediately I've gone. I just didn't want to know. So I'm outside. And everybody else is still down there and they're still talking. And I remember I'm on my own and I'm sitting on Sam have sort of just come down, and they're kind of like, oh, right, yeah, Dan, like, something did happen. And I was like, okay. They're like, and so the story apparently goes that during World War II, there was a couple of girls or a group of girls coming back from school, going to school. I don't want to be too precise on that. And I think from what I remember was that there was a tree that had fallen on one of them or something. An incident had happened above the caves. And because the cave system's got a hospital, or had a hospital in it at the time, they sort of rushed her in to the hospital. But by that point, she sort of passed away. And what was really interesting was that the girl had passed away, and it was during World War II. So it would have tied in with the string, with the gas mask bottle, and obviously school, so blazer. It just all tied in. So I was really distressed by it. And I remember we were going to Greenwich. The idea was we were going to go to Chislehurst Caves and we were going to pop down to Greenwich because I love Greenwich, and it's just such a cool place to eat, really. So we all went down there to get some food, and I was really grizzling, and I don't cry really a lot. I mean, I'm not really a crier by nature at all. I think if people know me, I'm quite sort of, It's not in my nature to be that way necessarily. And I was grizzling. I was like, I wasn't crying. I was grizzling. I was like, oh, it was almost like a weight had been lifted off my mind of like, okay, right, so it's just, it all made sense. And that had happened. And I remember, bless Harley and Ian and Sam, they really came together for me, and I was really grateful for it. You know, we were sitting down, and it was the thing that, you know, what I love about exploring and doing everything is that afterwards you get to sit down with friends and have a meal, and you have to discuss what you've seen. Be amazing. That's not the end of the story, though, which you'll probably know by now. That had all happened, and that was when I was 27. Fast forward to 2 years ago now. I'm at Hever Caves Castle, Folly, and it's been recorded on the YouTubes. I keep saying it like that. On the YouTubes. On my channel, you can type in Hever Cave Castle Folly. I think that's what the title is. And we've gone down there, and I am familiar with the place already. So it's, you know, but there's a section in the Folly where it's like this sort of like you see it in the video. It's like it's very narrow, like tunnel basically, where it's very awkward to get into. And at the time of recording, I was very overweight anyway. I was huge, and my mobility is just really bad. That's what happens when you put on weight. And surprise, surprise for me anyway. So I was very overweight, and I'm trying to get my fat butt through this narrow tunnel type of thing in the Castle Folly. And the thing that already grates me is that you see it in the video, that there's freaking cave spiders, as per usual, that are right by the entrancing, and I'm sort of having to like duck to avoid these like egg sacs, which are pretty much grazing like the top of my head. And I'm thinking, oh, for God's sake. And I'm crawling through, and I probably made a little bit of headway in there, only a little bit. And you see me record everything, and everything looks nice and normal. And then all of a sudden, like I see something, and I see something, and it wasn't recorded on the YouTube. It wasn't recorded on my video camera. Because I think I was sort of still shuffling around and whatever, and I was literally debating how far to keep going in, because really I'd recorded what needs to be recorded. So I kept going, and then I see it, or the return of what I'd seen. So I'd seen the same type of cloud that I'd seen at Chislehurst Caves, this kind of spectral thing, and it was a lot smaller because it's way narrower, and it was moving. From what I remember, I know we've even a couple of years ago, my image of it, I tried to block it out, if I'm being brutally honest. It's like therapy for me. It was a cloud, and it started to move forward, and it was the same sort of eerie cloud that's sort of gone, and it started to move, and I was like, okay, I need to sort of get out of here. This is not good. There's something wrong about it. And as I've said to you before, you know, like I've been in tighter, narrower places. I'm not claustrophobic. I'm not, you know, nothing really freaks me out, to be honest. To be fair, I'm quite chilled out by nature with stuff like that. Maybe because I just enjoy it. And maybe, you know, I was worried because I was overweight as well. You know, like I'm sort of thinking, oh God, like, you know, like it was trouble enough getting in there. How the hell am I going to get out? Because I'm having to sort of reverse. And I just see this spectral cloud sort of move towards me from a distance, and I'm like, I just need to get out there. So I get out, and I think in the video you sort of see me sort of analyse. I don't really talk about it, and I don't even think I spoke to anybody really about it, because this is really the first time outside of a small group of friends that I've spoken about this, what I'd seen. And I'd seen it down there, and it was exactly the same as the thing that I'd seen at Chislehurst Caves. Now, Hever Castle and Chislehurst Caves are totally separate. There's no relationship towards them or anything else. But the spectral image that I'd seen was on a smaller scale, but it was moving and doing exactly the same thing, except it was narrower. And the only way that I can, if I was to try and rationalise it, I wonder if it was a trick of the light with my torch. I wonder if it was dust that was like being created, because again, I'm shuffling through and I'm creating bits of dust. I don't know whether it was because the natural fear of knowing that there was cave spiders literally like right above my head. I don't know. You know, it could have all accumulated into something like that. It might have been that. But however, subsequently, so you can check that out. You can check that out online, Hever Castle Caves, Folly, and you can see how distressed I was about it. I never really explained it, because I never really opened up to anybody about it. But it was exactly the same thing that I'd seen at Chislehurst. So I've come out and I'm very shaken up by it. And then maybe a year or so goes by, and I'm sort of talking to the spiritualist about it, because, as you know, I'm quite a spiritual person, if you can't sort of tell. I'm sort of talking about this sort of thing, and I said, you know, sort of saying, well, what's the darkest thing you've sort of encountered or sort of seen? And I said, well, you know, apart from the obvious stuff, like I've seen Satan worship, I've seen lots of animal carcasses, I've seen evidence of sacrifice, I've seen all this sort of stuff. And I said, but the thing that always freaked me out was I'd seen this same image twice in two separate locations. And she turned around to me and said, you realise that that's an omen, like a sort of, like a very omenistic type of thing that you've just seen. And I was like, well, can you explain it to me a bit more? And she'd said, sometimes you get like a form of, I'm not going to sort of misquote her, but it was sort of along the lines of, you get like, you can get just as much, you get a spirit animal, which is a good vibe. You also can get a negative one that will show its head or rear its ugly face. And she said what you probably encountered was that, and that the two times you'd seen it on completely separate incidents, years and years apart from each other, was just as a warning sign for you that don't ever think that you're always sort of safe in your own little comfortable bubble. And she'd always warned me, which always sort of stuck with me, is that, you know, don't ever like, almost as a warning of like, don't ever sort of push yourself too much, because in these sort of situations, because sometimes it'll only take one incident for you to sort of get bitten. And it really resonated with me. And then, you know, I've still gone out and done stupid adventures, and I've still done lots of things. And, you know, as I said to you before, you know, that my priority isn't to record everything on YouTube, because it's just, if I'm being brutally honest, it's just not a big enough channel to sort of warrant doing that. So I just don't do it. If it was, however, I'd love to. If the channel became big for whatever reason, and, you know, I'd do produce more, as you sort of see. But for me now, I just don't do it. And I still like the idea of going out on adventures and not having to sort of feel like I'm recording it all the time. I'm such a purist. I'm like, hopefully you can understand all of that. And it just means that I get to sort of have a nice time without, I'm always conscious when I'm exploring of like recording, you know what I mean? And which is why 9 times out of 10, the places that I've gone to or recorded, I've been to before, so that at least I've enjoyed it without having to record. That was my ghost story, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed that. It's true. It's 100% true. I have to keep sort of saying that even to myself, because it even sort of worries me of what happened. My thoughts and feelings on spiritualness and everything else have still never changed. I've not, you know, I've not done anything. I still reflect on that story, the incidents that happened quite a lot. I still reflect on the sort of spectral image that I'd sort of seen, you know. And it's interesting because when you sort of see these true ghost stories, and you see people and they witness these weird, angry mists of these ghosts, And I'm thinking, well, I saw that. I saw a good one from what I saw, which was this girl. And then I also saw this evil, malicious cloud. But the thing was that I'd seen it twice in 2 separate locations. Just freaked me out. And I think, again, that's probably what freaked me out the most at Hever Castle Cave Folly, was because it wasn't... it was very similar to what I'd seen already. So, yeah. There you go. Feel free to like, share, subscribe. Feel free to spread the word of the channel as always. But most importantly, just say hello, really. And, you know, as I said to you before, later on down the, potentially now at the end of this year, as I'm recording this video, I'll start sort of hopefully trying to do 3 videos a week, hopefully, and also getting you out there to tell your wonderful ghost stories or paranormal stories. They don't have to be ghost ones, they can be anything unexplained. And I'll meet up with you. But that'll be later on this year, probably towards the end of this year now. You know, the world's an uncertain place as of recording this, so, you know, I'm in no rush to do that at the moment. So again, please don't think that I'm going to be doing 3 videos a week at the moment. I'll definitely be doing 2. It's just a case of, like I said, you know, if the channel gets a lot of subscribers, then I'm kind of like, great, because I'll need to get off my fat butt and actually start making more content. But at the moment, I'm quite happy of just sort of trundling along. I'm quite, as you know, people who know me out there, I'm a very humble person. I'm just grateful that I've got people out there who actually really like the channel. You know, I'd be happy if I only had 10 subscribers and if they really liked it. So to me, the fact that I've got what I've got now, again, I'm very grateful for. And as you've seen, I've done a thank you video. So thank you to everybody out there, as always, for supporting me. It's really meant a lot, as I've said. So stay safe. Any more words of Phoenix history, because history matters. However, in this instance, it was history and paranormal. Any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Harley will hopefully put a comment down in the thing as well. And I will see you all very soon. Take care for now, everybody. And look after yourselves. And, you know, just make the most of this life that we have. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.